How's everybody?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm excited to be here.
Okay.
How old am I that this is the highlight of my week?
No, I, I wish that was my highlight. That's crazy.
No, y'all have real lives. I just, I don't. Um,
You do. It's just a different season.
it's just, yeah, exactly. But this is, I mean, y'all work in the real world. I work at university, and that's not the real world.
Hmm.
Um, that's not really, you can't really count that as the real world. And so, uh, y'all have jobs that really matter, and have impact. Um, we have to try to figure out ways like this to have impact and matter, is to get to see people like you and learn from y'all.
I've learned a lot in the program, so thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's, you know, there's a lot of places you can get a piece of paper, union card, degree, or whatever. But um, what we hope is that you'll be able to actually go out and be successful. Number one, get a job. Number two, be successful. That's the most important. Um, we talked last night. I mean, school administrators have got to be champions for kids. Um,
Hmm.
Public education is under attack. Our education is
Hmm.
under attack from all fronts. But what folks don't realize is when they the currency in that in those attacks and who is children,
Hmm.
their lives. They want children to fail. They want to argue. They want things to go bad. We're on the other side of that. We want things to go good.
That's
We
right.
want kids to get what they need, and you got to, and we all know, whether, not because I'm in the business or y'all are in the business, but we all know the highest correlate for school success is a quality principal. Period.
Hmm.
Facilities, money, all those things are part of the equation, but they are not. They're some of the variables. But if you look at the amount of variance, I mean, it's all it's the lion's share of the variance in the quality of the school is the principal. Um, and that's why these programs are important, and that's why you can get cheaper. We just
Hmm.
hope you can't get better. That's our deal, is trying to be better. Dr. Sane, I see you're with us tonight.
I am. Yep.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'm glad you're with us tonight. Dr. Sane will be the voice of reason. I get a little exercised on case study night, but he will be the voice of reason as our resident principal expert. Oh man, what time is it? Is it time to start? I think it is. I'm gonna go
One
ahead
minute
and jump
left.
in. I'm gonna go ahead and jump in and get started as people are joining us. We got a little housekeeping to do before we get to your presentations, and I'll try not to take too much time tonight. And so let me start out with, I am very pleased with your OMA work. I'm very, very pleased with that. It's time, as we move, to start instituting, some changes to your master schedule. If we look at, let's see, yep, task 3 guidance. I just want to go over this quickly. Look at one of the things that folks do in their narrative and they don't remember to do is, we not only want you to look at the actual master schedule itself, but the master scheduling process. That's the most important thing. The master schedule is a product of the master scheduling process. Did your school start with federal law and then state law and then board policy and then EBOS or performance data and then teacher input? Did they do that? We want you to look at the process, and when you're talking about, looking at your master schedule, um, you know, that it's not just the biggest mistake that school administrators make is half the people are mad about the master schedule. and they changed the master schedule. No, change the process that led to that master schedule. And the worst thing you can do is just change it, because the half that mad are now be they'll still be mad, and the half that was happy before, they'll be mad. So now everybody will be mad at you. And so, you know, you have to make sure, you know, does teacher input become four more important factors? Then once you've assessed the process that built the schedule, then look at the schedule, because maybe your recommendations will include, we need to make sure that we start out with our federal programs. You know, we're not meeting our obligation with our federal kids, or we're not getting enough hours, or, you know, we're not looking at our performance data. The right teachers aren't teaching the right course, you know, those kinds of things, teaching the right courses. So make sure that you understand that in your assessment, in your narrative for task 3, you need to look at not only the schedule itself, but the process that led to building that schedule. And that's what you got to change. If you want the master schedule to change, you got to change the process. As you know, that's the biggie. So I want to make sure that we cover that as we're moving. Y'all are doing well. Just keep up with your timeline. Now, remember, you know, this semester, we are practicing gradual release, or what in my day was called intentional abandonment. I'm stepping back more, and y'all are stepping forward more, in terms of y'all got to step up and begin to lead. You know, you don't need me to hold your hand, tell you what you need to do. You're adults. You know how to manage your time, when to get stuff in, what needs to be done. So, you know, I'm pleased with that. We seem to be doing very well with that. But the whole notion is I'm trying to transfer some of that to you as you need to step out and display your leadership. All right, so let's look at our weekly schedule, which we'll talk about where we go from here. Next week, I'll be doing discipline, and then the following week, you know, hold your hats. We got a couple of Dr. Sain's sessions coming up, and that one will be a really good one, with the couple that he's got coming up, especially the EC one, but they'll both be great. But let's look at this week's discussion board. And so, you know, we're looking at financial responsibility, you know, being sued, the three functions of negligence being nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. Nonfeasance being you had a duty to act and you didn't. Misfeasance, you had a duty to act and did, but you did the wrong thing. It wasn't intentional, but you did the wrong thing and somebody was harmed, or, you know, or had damages, as the law says. And then malfeasance, you intentionally did the wrong thing, and you knew it was wrong when you did it, but you did it anyway. Obviously, tonight's case study is an example of malfeasance, where a teacher intentionally did the wrong thing to harm a student intentionally, and federal, state laws were broken, as well as local board policies. And we'll dive into that later. But those are the things. I took notes this week, as I normally do, and here are some things some highlighted things that I want to make sure that everybody. Now you can go to the discussion board and you can read these posts for yourself, but I'll just highlight them for you. Christina Davis, excellent job. She was talking about supervision, especially, you know, you just because you make a supervision schedule doesn't mean people will be there, or a duty roster. When you go to court and you say, well, I had a duty roster and I don't know why that kid got run over in the car line. Well, number one, did you have enough people there? You know, private vehicles are always a problem. Did you have enough people there? Number one. And number two, were you sure that they were where they were supposed to be? Well, I told them to go. Did you go and check? No, I had a duty to act and didn't. Not good. And so you need to make sure that you not only train your teachers and you review your policies and procedures, but you also check. Formative assessment, go and see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you have a duty roster and you never go and check to see that people on their duty, then something goes bad. It's not going to go well for you if they didn't fulfill their obligations. Look at Lana Green's. Hers was very thorough. If you want to, you know, she hit all the dimensions when she answered. Excellent job. Sandra brought up a good point, and it kind of goes with the medication policy. You know, your district has a policy on distributing medication. You better make sure you follow through on that. And many districts now have policies on sharing candy and other things that might have allergens in them, like peanut allergies. So you better know what the policies are. And make sure that your people are trained in those. You know, you got to have professional development and supervise your people, make sure they're supervising their places. One of the things that came up last night and that also was mentioned by Allison, good job by Allison, is supervision and training, but something like CPI, restraint training. If you ask folks to intervene in physical confrontations like fights, then you need to make sure that your folks have been CPI trained, that if you're going to ask them to do that. We had an assistant principal fairly close to Charlotte this week. He's on suspension now. He restrained a kid during the fights that he used a MMA rear naked choke and choked him out. I don't believe that's part of restraint training. It wasn't when I went through it, or when I had my people do it, or when I was in charge of that for the largest district in the state. I don't believe choking them out is part of it. So it's not going to go well for him, because they've got video of him choking a kid out. So if you're going to ask people to be on supervision and to intervene in physical conflicts, you got to make sure that they're trained to do that. You can't be choking people out. That's a bad look. Everlyn made sure that we all remembered the 4 elements of negligence: duty, breach, causation, and damages. We use those terms. You have a duty to act. Breach is when you don't. Causation, did it cause something to happen that shouldn't have happened? And then, of course, damages is what you get sued for. Negligence, there has to be damages. It has to be harmed. We usually call it harm rather than damages. But those are that. So we had that. And in the other classes, there was a lot of good things too. I think we touched on pretty much all of those in this one. Yeah, but kind of to finish, it's that time of year. There's supposed to be some weather moving in maybe in different parts of the state this weekend. One of the things that, I know the maintenance guys do it, but one of the things that if you're an administrator that you better do, you better check your cameras for eye spots. That's part of that facilities inventory in inclement weather. They may have missed a spot. They may not have come. You may have an interior courtyard, those kinds of things where they wouldn't be able to get a tractor or scrape to. And they're notoriously bad about not getting to those because they have to get off and get a shovel. And so I worked at a school in Western North Carolina. I actually have a picture somewhere in my archives. That picture is soon to be 40 years old, and it's me on a shovel. We had an interior courtyard at the school that you couldn't get tractors to. And we had to shovel off the breezeway because all of our classrooms, as you know, in those kinds of buildings, all the classrooms have an outside door. There is no hallway, and they have a breezeway. Well, you can't get a tractor down. That breezeway is not wide enough, and with the railing, you got to shovel those off. Well, the maintenance guys, they'd come and scrape the parking lot all around, then they'd be gone. You better, and so I've got a picture of me on shovel duty. I was a lot younger and slimmer. I actually had hair then, and it was black, but that's a story for another day. But that's a biggie this time of year, is that, they declare schools open, let's go. You listen to the radio and they say we're having school, you show up and you figure that the maintenance guys have done all that. Nah. Don't assume that they've made your school completely safe. Your custodian should have some of that rock salt or something to deal with ice. If they don't, you better make sure they have it. I mean, your county office, your maintenance people have it, but did your custodian have it, or is it he forgot to get any? You didn't need any. He didn't need any in the summertime, so he forgot to get any back in August when school opened. Those are the kinds of things that'll get you. So, just a word to the wise: weather's coming in this weekend. This would be the kind of thing that on Monday morning, you'd be checking your facilities for that. You'd be walking all the shaded areas, making sure those things were there. Let me stop my share now. Dr. Sain, I want you to chip in on that. What other hot spots have you got that I might have missed?
You hit the nail on the head. I want to go back to the CPI thing and in the day of student cell phones. And I'm not saying that you should not restrain a student when they need to be restrained, but it is viewed and interpreted so differently from the public than we know what's going on in the classroom. When I was a principal, I had 8 behavior classrooms. I understand the importance of it, but I think that when we get in that situation as leaders, the anxiety, the adrenaline kind of amps up a bit, but it's important to keep your calm and then try to remove as many kids away from the student as possible before there is any type of intervention. You know, I have seen so many principals get into some hot water, and I've seen 2 in my career that have gotten fired over it, and that wasn't the intention at all. But you can't prove that in the court of law, especially when there's a video that shows that they were doing something differently. And one happened to be where the administrator was trying to restrain the correct way, but the student started fighting back, and it looked like the principal was not doing it correctly. So that principal was just put on administrative leave. But still, my point being is, with the behaviors increasing with students in our buildings, that is something that you're going to face. And that's where you have to have a clear mind and only restrain unless it is absolutely necessary. Yep.
As we exit to our case studies tonight, I'll use me as the bad example. You might find it in WSOC's archives in Charlotte. I was celebrated as a principal for choking 2 out and bringing out 2 under each of my arms. I had cuts under each of my eyes. This was in the wake of the Columbine shooting, when kids were rioting and we were trying to calm them down and kids were going crazy in school. It was a bad situation and I was celebrated. I would be fired today. I was with Kim Bratton. They came out to school and I was made out to be some kind of a hero. I felt like an idiot, but I would not be made out as a hero today. That was 30 years ago. I would not be a hero today. I would be unemployed. You better know that times change and standards are different. And that's a great point by Dr. Singh. Times have changed. Things are different. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what your intent was. If there had been a video of me coming out, out of that gym with 1 under each arm in a chokehold, that probably wouldn't have been good. And part of that too is we show up in court and these 2 17-year-olds are standing there and they're, 5'7", 130 soaking wet. And I'm twice as big and heavy as both of them put together. That probably wouldn't have gone well. That was before I got the furniture disease. My chest fell in my drawers. A giant shows up with 2 little kids. It don't matter how mean and hateful and nasty they were. You're going to lose. You're just going to lose. It's just that simple. You're going to lose. It doesn't matter what you did or what your intent was. You better know that. So you better get trained. You better get your people trained, because that's a big negligent. That's a big lawsuit coming your way. All right, we're ready for our case studies. We're right on time. Case study. Okay, who's our first team? Share your screen and let's roll. I'm excited about Bobby tonight. Here we go.
All right. We have Kristen Carroll, Christina Davis, Naima Branch, Michelle Brunson, and Derek Crockett. All right, so we've got the 14th Amendment here. I underlined the part that we're really focusing on here. Without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The authors of the book noted that the right to due process is a cornerstone of our civil liberty, and it guarantees fairness to all citizens, which in this case, we are talking about our students. It makes sure that we are the parents are noticed of the charges brought against their child and an explanation of the evidence that was there. And then the student has the presentation is allowed to present his or her side of the problem.
Sorry, yelling at my girls. Substantive due process requires the rules or policies to be fair in and of themselves. So we talked a lot about this school policy. The school policy stated that cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher. And so
Now, let me interrupt. Please remember, I've always stop right here. Please remember that everybody has to understand this. It can only be on that assignment. Only on that assignment. Why can't it be a failing grade for the year, the term, or any of those? Because that would be a federal violation of zero tolerance policies. You can't write policies that are zero tolerance, that if you do this, you do that, and fail for the year. So, I get too many students who get confused about this, but they were following the policy, the teacher was following. No. They can only fail that assignment. Now there can be something other than that, but that's the most that you could do on that piece of it. So let's be clear. May require a failing grade by the teacher on the assignment.
Yes, we went back and forth about that, because if it had happened at the beginning of the school year, she had already counted him out for the whole entire school year, and that was just unfair to him. The student violated the academic policy. He admitted to her, but there was nobody there to witness that he actually admitted it. She is not following all the rules of the policy, specifically the rule related to the assignment. It weighed more than 10%.
Now, please remember, and I've got this pulled up to show you later. Is this one assignment, can it count 10%?
No, it can't.
All assignments in aggregate for the year can only count 10% as well. So we got to be careful on that too. Sometimes teachers will try to sharp pencil you on those kinds of things as well. In aggregate, they can only count 10% for the entire year. Now, one of the things that some districts do, and let me show you this right now, that the first group always gets the teachable moments as we go. I've got this one, I'm gonna share my screen, we'll come right back to you. I've got this one ready for us right here. Now, what Charlotte Mecklenburg has done, which I don't particularly care for, but they've gone to hell since I left them. Not really, but let me pull it up right quick. Oh, where are we? Where did you go? So here's the simplified grading projects. Out of class 10, homework 10. Unfortunately, and the reason I highlighted those, unfortunately, in Charlotte Mecklenburg, let's see if I've got it over here under this. Do I? No, I had it. But I'll go back, pull it up from the original. So what I have got, oh, here it is right here. What I don't like is what CMS has done. They put those two together and call it 20%. But now they say it's homework and warm-ups, all they say it's projects and assignments, but they put it together like this. The problem with that is you're supposed to know as a teacher that it's 10 and 10. And again, you can't assume that they will know that. I'm not a fan of it being expressed that way, because the state board is very clear. They're 10 and 10 in aggregate for the year. Because it says 20 there, some teachers might take that as a sign, well, I can count this part 20%. Again, as we know, sometimes folks will do stuff that you just wouldn't think they'd do and that you never thought of. But now, again, it's 10 and 10, whether you count this as an out-of-class assignment or homework. They count 10% in aggregate for the entire year, not one, in aggregate for the entire year. Again, that's part of that protection. I'm sorry, Christina, please continue with your presentation.
Oh, it's okay. go to the next slide, Naima. Procedural due process requires that the policy, rules, and regulations be carried out in a fair manner. The teacher broke the policy related to the grades. Their percentage was excessive at 10%. Ms. Barton wanted the administration to carry through out a fair policy in an unfair manner. Due process was not implemented. So before class, we talked about how she should have started the process by actually making a referral or write-up to the office. That would have informed the principal, and then the principal would have informed the parents, and they would have had a hearing, but she didn't do that. She just
Right.
jumped to calling her person to support her.
Yep. Yeah. And let's remember, she made this one assignment count more than 50% of the yearly grade. So in effect, it doesn't matter if this kid had had 100 average and everything else, including the state exam for the remainder of the year, could this student have passed? No. So you say, well, she didn't exclude him for a year. She just gave him, but by virtue of weighting this assignment illegally more than half and giving him a 0, that in effect is a 0 tolerance expulsion, no due process, with no relief here, nothing they can do. Now, I get folks who say to me, well, he can go to summer school, so that doesn't make it a 0 tolerance policy. That does not change it. So let's look at that right quick. Let's understand this as we go. I know I have this one. Okay. This is in your state manual that we've gone over many times on disciplinary reporting. And it says right here, you have to report illegal no tolerance expulsions. All right. And so what it says is, an expulsion is moving child his or her regular school for the remainder of the year or longer. Removals include BOSIS and assigned to alternative programs. So what it means is, even if you give the kid like an alternative assignment for 6 weeks rather than failing for the year, or summer school rather than failing for a year, which is an alternative assignment, that still does not remove it from the category of a 0 tolerance illegal expulsion by federal guidelines. So what I have seen, and Dr. and I'm sure Dr. Sane would echo this, what I have seen is folks who will give some draconian punishment and then, in negotiations, reduce it to what the kid should have had, or even more than he should have had, and the parents will go for it because it's much less than what they said. It's like when you go to the doctor and he says, I'm gonna have to cut your leg off. And you say, really? He said, no, just your toe. Oh, the toe's all right. But if you just said, I'm going to take your toe off to start with, there'd have been a hoorah. And so that's what they're trying to prevent here, is some big draconian, overreaction to get you to accept, a lesser without any due process and without any review. That's why that rule is in there, is that, rather than actually looking at the substance of the case, and doing due process, many parents would go for the summer school deal rather than being failed for the year. But that's a very unethical way to do business. It's also illegal according to federal law, as you can see highlighted right here. It's not only unethical, it's also illegal to do that. I'll stop my sharing. Go right ahead.
One of the things that we spend a lot of time discussing, we also spend a lot of time discussing, when we're talking about grades, and we're talking about the ultimate responsibility for grades in the school. We looked at this 115C-288, and 115C-288 talks about the powers and duties of the principal, and it's ultimately up to the principal to make sure that grades are fairly and accurately assigned, reported, so on and so forth. So, the buck stops with the principal ultimately when it comes to this, this type of thing. So he was going to have to deal the principal for unfair grading, yes, there are probably going to be some consequences for the teacher, but ultimately, you know, the major ramifications for something like this, you know, that where due process is not applied to a grading policy or whatever, is ultimately going to be the responsibility of the principal, and he's going to have
That
to
is
deal with
correct.
those. He's going to have to deal with that. And, you know, we had a lot of discussion about this, because before most of us came into this class, I mean, I guess I knew it, but it never really dawned on me that ultimate responsibility for grading falls on the principal.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Derek, because if you let this stand, who's going to get sued? That would be
Correct.
you, because who's it say here on the screen's responsible? You. Two things to remember here, and if you can't remember, write it down. Grades are supposed to reflect what a kid knows or doesn't know, his achievement, not his behavior. So that's the first problem, and that's why the principal has to be the one to make sure that his grade reflects what he knows, not his behavior. So this wasn't really this is a discipline incident. We need to go over to the discipline chart, need to look at our code of conduct about what to do with this. And, you know, once we look at our code of conduct, it says most we can do is a level 1 for cheating, which is 1 day in school suspension. That's going to be standard across the state of North Carolina and everybody's code of conduct. I mean, you could just do a conference, and you can't let him do makeup, but you're going to be responsible for that, whatever that is. And so again, grades have to reflect what they know, not their behavior. And you have to be real careful about that as the principal. And the second one is when in this case, I wish Steve Laws was with us tonight, not that, you know, he wouldn't be a pain in the butt in himself, but Steve's former superintendent friend of mine that I work with, we teach this class to doctoral students. We do it in a very accelerated manner. But one of the things that Steve, you know, when students question, well, why didn't the superintendent do this, or why didn't the superintendent do that? Why did the superintendent just tell him to be careful? Can the superintendent tell him what grade to give? No. Superintendents are expressly forbidden from doing that. Not only does it say who will do it, superintendents are expressly forbidden from not do it. So people said, well, why didn't the superintendent bail him out? He can't. If the superintendent had said do this or do that, he had been in violation of federal law and state law. So all the superintendent can say is you better, you know, make the right decision here, do your research, know what you got to do. It's your responsibility. Does this grade reflect what the kids know, what the kid knows, or is this a disciplinary? Was he due process? I mean, those are the things that the superintendent would remind you of. But you're exactly right, Derek. This is, you know, a lot of folks don't realize when it says this, that it's not you, it's not the teacher that's on the line when they get sued. It's you, because you're the one who has the ultimate authority. And that's called standing in court. You have standing. That the teacher recommended this, that's neither here nor there. You're the one that's going to be in the docket, you know, down at the Old Bailey. You know, that's the way that works. You better know that. All right. Excellent. Let's move on. Who's doing this part?
Naima.
Sorry, I was muted. The arbitrary standard is basically a standard that's not meaningful. And so in Bobby's case, Ms. Barton assigned a project that could potentially cause a student to fail if they received a 0 for the entire year. So we also talked about how Ms. Barton wanted the school to uphold the rules. And so Ms. Barton wanted them to apply the school policy, which was to maintain standard of personal honesty as it applies to cheating or any kind. She wanted them to fail the entire year, and she wanted the school to uphold that. But in reality, she was breaking a law by assigning an assignment that was worth more than, the required that was stated in the policy, the 10%. I'm going to go on to the capricious standard and how it applies. A capricious decision is one that's always changing. It's like erratic. And so in this case, the grading policy was not being upheld, but Jane wanted the school to uphold the policy on cheating. Again, I wasn't sure if she was being dishonest or if she did read the policy on grades, what was going on there. And she just wasn't upholding the policy. But this could cause the student to not go to the next grade level because he could potentially fail off one assignment. And we have to consider that this is a teenager and that it was probably just harsh. He could have redone the assignment or gotten some kind of help with maybe managing things. I know he was into sports and different things like that. So maybe he was just stressed. It doesn't mean that he had to fail the entire school year.
Yeah. So let me kind of summarize quickly for you, and I won't have to share on this one. When you think of arbitrary, think of playing favorites. You know, you do this to somebody, or in this case, you know, retribution on somebody who's not your favorite. So arbitrary simply means that if me and Derek are out back smoking and Naima catches us and she's the administrator, she sends Derek back to class and shoots me. All right. So she has participated in something that's both arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary is she picked me to get punished and not Derek. We did the same thing. That would be arbitrary. She played favorites. And then capricious, the capricious part is she gave me more punishment than the rule book said that she should be able to give me, the code of conduct. Remember, the state sets what the infractions are. Remember, we saw that, you know, UB this or RO that. It says, you know, you can't do this. So misrepresentation or cheating is a UB, but the state doesn't say what you're supposed to give. The local district adopts the code of conduct. Now, I don't know. I haven't read them all, but I don't reckon that there's probably a code of conduct in North or South Carolina that says the penalty for smoking is shooting me. I don't think so. That seems a little excessive to me, since I'd be the one getting shot. That would be really personal to me. But that seems somewhat excessive. So the whole notion here of the capricious part of this is a reasonable person standard when you go to court. Would a reasonable person think it was all right to fail a kid and exclude him for a whole year over his brother's homework assignment? I mean, just think of that on face value. Even if you weren't an administrator, an educator in a pending or already seeing administrator, that you excluded a kid for a whole year over turning in his brother's homework assignment. Wow. Try to sell that one in court and see how that goes for you. That's the capricious part. Capricious is too much punishment, more than the book allows. Arbitrary is you pick one rather than the other. And so, yes, she picked Bobby. She singled him out. She manipulated the grading scale. So she was both arbitrary and capricious because of her manipulation of the grading scale. It wouldn't have made a difference what Bobby had learned all year or what his average was. Bobby was going to fail if you make one assignment worth more than half the yearly grade and give it a 0. I mean, the most that he could have had, his yearly average would have been a 49. If it was more than 50% on this one, I don't know how much more, but it doesn't matter. I mean, Bobby fails, period. This is a 0 tolerance expulsion. Putting a kid out for a year is a 0 tolerance. For the rest of the year or more, this is a whole year, it is a 0 tolerance expulsion, which is federally prohibited. All right, move on.
So we discussed due process and what should have happened. We talked about ultimately everything, again, falling on the principal. So the principal should analyze the laws and then make sure that they have a plan in place. We talked about setting up a meeting with the teacher, Ms. Barton, contacting the parents and, being gentle about the fact that their kid has potentially used their brother's assignment. Then maybe research Bobby's past grade pattern. He's also into sports, so maybe check with his coaches to try to get some background information about him. Meet with his parents and Bobby, and then consider the law and all of that. Bobby, I'm going to go on. Bobby they could have had him work with the counselor about pressure of managing his time. with homework and sports. Maybe he was under pressure and that's why he did some of this. Kids are competitive in sports. Then maybe HR should be contacted so that they could be involved in the meeting with the teacher, because ultimately the teacher broke the law. So she's gonna have to face consequences on her behalf. Assignments shouldn't count more than 10% of the student's grade. We've been, going back, reiterating that a few times because it's so important. And but basically she was trying to get Bobby, suspended or out of this or failed the entire year. But in reality, she violated the code of ethics by assigning the assignment more than 10%. And she kind of exposed herself by,
Yes.
doing this to the kid.
Yeah. To your point, how many of us know people who are in the school business who hate kids? Seems counterintuitive, but we all know people who do.
All right, so we have the definition of ethics here is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means character or conduct. And I bring that to our attention because when we're having personal conversations about ethics, words like moral and right and values come up. But when it's a professional conversation, the words like policy and code of conduct and professionalism come up. Because we have a degree and have specialized skills, we as educators are held to a higher standard, and we must be held accountable for our actions if they are against these laws. And go ahead, Naima. And we must remember the word ethics as we move into our 4 paradigms of ethics. The first one is paradigms for ethics is care. It is the compassion, the concern, or the connection, making that relationship, nurture and encourage your students, and always try to do what is best for them. I have the graphic here that talks about 6 ways to practice empathy in the classroom. I don't feel Ms. Barton did these with this assignment. So as it pertains to the case study, Ms. Barton did not approach the situation using the care paradigm of ethics. She did not approach the situation with compassion or empathy. She did not attempt to meet Bobby's needs. What if he really wasn't, the reason he plagiarized wasn't because he didn't have time? What if it was because he was struggling with the assignment, or he was a low reader or a mathematician? She never searched or research that further.
Okay, moving on to the paradigm of ethics for justice. There are the paradigms of justice listed, and I've bolded the ones that pertain to the case of Bobby cheating, which is fairness, equity, and justice, and arbitrary and capricious.
Yeah.
And next slide. So on fairness, equity, and justice, as we've said multiple times, it isn't fair for any student to fail a course for one assignment. Work completed throughout the course should be considered into the final grade. Equity, does Ms. Barton fail all students if they fail one assignment, or does she want to punish Bobby more severely because of personal issues? And justice, Bobby should fail the assignment, not the course, because the school policy states that the consequence of cheating may require a failing grade. So the assignment, yes, the course, no.
We also talked about the paradigm of ethics critique, and we talked about how, pointed out that corrupted morals would apply because the teacher is abusing her power and breaking the law by assigning a random assignment to be counted as worth more. Power and social class, Bobby's grandfather is an important part of the school community, and his importance to the school should not be a deciding factor. The punishment should be the same regardless. In this case, it doesn't fit. Incident of an offense type versus action type. So Ms. Barton used excessive power. I think we all agree that she could have done something. She could have used more compassion by, allowing him to redo the assignment or work with the counselor, but she wanted him to fail.
All right, so the paradigm of ethics, this paradigm addresses professionalism, and we looked at these, and the first thing that fell under this was the ultimate responsibility for grading rests on the principal, because the principal has the accountability for student achievement and success, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I think oftentimes, and we discussed this, that oftentimes, everything that a principal has to do, the most important part of it can sometimes get lost, because the principal has these other big things that they have to deal with in the school. But ultimately, the most important thing is the success and the learning of the student, and everything else should come secondary. You need to be mindful of the legal consequences. There was a lack of consideration of the legal ramifications for this policy. What would be the result of no application of due process? And, Dr. Lamb talked to us about that earlier. You could be sued. You could lose your house. You are the one that has standing. You're the one that's going to be, going to have to appear at the Old Bailey, as he said. Ethical behavior. There was a lack of ethical behavior on the teacher's part. It's not just the administrator. This is a case study about the student, about the administrator, and about the teacher. The teacher behaved in an arbitrary and capricious manner in this instance. She wanted unfair implementation of the policy. It would have been fair for him to have failed the assignment, but it would be unfair for him to fail for the year. A key part of professional behavior is equal and equitable treatment of these students. Was Bobby treated equitably? We don't know all of the background and all of the other layers that were present here. Did this teacher have it out for Bobby because of who his family was? And, and that could kind of have been addressed in the other paradigms as well. So it's something to keep in mind. We have to be professional in our dealings, and we have to be mindful of what our ultimate job is. It's taking care of the students and assuring their learning.
Okay. All right, who's got this one?
Oh, this is me. Sorry. So we talked about how we can stop this from happening again. And I'm doing some of this at my school already. Reviewing the rules and policies and procedures during staff meetings. My principal has tasked me with that. And when we were going over some of the rules and responsibilities of teachers on Monday, some of the staff members were like, oh, I didn't know that. Because we have a little boy who has an EpiPen, and nobody knew that they all needed to have training on the EpiPen if he was in their class. Offer an in-person meeting to discuss expectations for the school year. And if the parents couldn't show up, maybe having them sign the syllabus. Principals should review the syllabus for each class at the beginning of the school year. And if the teacher's going to make any changes, she needs to have it approved by the principal before she shares it with the students or the parents. And before the teacher assigns any assignment, she should unpack it and explain the grading policy and what the expectations are.
All right. Excellent. You can stop your share now.
Dr. Lamb,
All
can
right.
I just do something right there?
Yeah, I want you. Yeah, it's your turn.
Well, Christina, you just hit the nail on the head, because you know, when we're going through a lot of the stuff in this class, it can sometimes become a bit overwhelming and all of the things that we as administrators have to do. But so here's what I recommend is just kind of what your principal has tasked you with doing. Always find people who want to be future leaders in your building and have them double check your work. Give them leadership responsibilities and let them help you, because it is impossible to know everything that's going on with just your set of eyes. So as an assistant principal, you are going to be tasked with things that's going to take sometimes 15 sets of eyes. So find people in your building who can help you do just that. And it can't just be a one and done. It has to be every single school year and every single semester. That's the unfortunate part about administration. You can't take your foot off the gas ever. So I just wanted to call out what your principal is doing is going to help you become a better leader, but you've got to make sure that you nurture everybody else in your building once you become leaders.
Yeah. And so I had written down, I wanted to address that too. You need to do this every August and every January. You need to have those required work days that you have coming back. That's your legal responsibilities to cover all this stuff in the faculty handbook, the grading policy, if there's any changes, all of those kinds of things. Make sure that, like you say, the syllabus and all that. Now, you know, one of the things that I do, and again, I don't want to throw my shoulder out, pat myself on the back, but one of the things that I do, which is, you know, is make sure that I write all the syllabus and build all the shells and put all the stuff in them, you know, for your classes at Gardner Webb, because I'm responsible to make sure that all the policies are carried out. Now, if I was smarter, I'd get some people to help me, and I have. And so I now have teams like the 603 team, the 602 team, the 601, and I pop into them and have them do that with me, and you know, I contribute to that. And just like what Dr. Sane just said, I've got people and I utilize them, so I don't have to do it all. I'm responsible for it all, but I make sure it all gets done. But you know, yes, you need to go over all these policies with your people, but now a caution that goes along with that. Don't be that principal that punishes the many for the sins of the few. If you got a person coming in late, talk to the person who's coming in late. Don't get on the intercom and don't put up notices in the lounge, you know, about those kinds of things. You know, if you got somebody who's turning their grades in late or doing some of these things, you need to have critical conversations with them. Not with everybody. Don't get in that habit of trying to avoid conflict by punishing everybody. Because I'm that butthole that would stand up and call you out for that, you know, back in the day. When I'm here early every day. Why am I having to do this? You know, I turn my stuff in. I got, you know, y'all don't know what a register is, but we used to keep attendance in registers. Y'all aren't old enough. But you know, my register sheet was in every month on time. Why am I having to be called to a meeting about getting my stuff in, or somebody thrashing me over the loudspeaker? You know, make sure that if you have people who are not compliant, that you address them individually. Make sure that you do that. All right, 2 things. Sports. Let me share my screen right quick. That always comes up. Please remember that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association sets all the behavior and conduct of all athletics, even down to practice time. So please remember that. And so I have it under Zoom session 4.3 for last week. It's right here, the high school athletic handbook. That's for both middle and high school. That is very specific to each sport in terms of practice time. Now, full disclosure, 90% of the kids who don't have time to do their athletics are not because of school or their academics, due to athletics, are not because of school-based athletics. I'd say 95% are not because of school-based athletics, because we are so highly controlled and regulated and supervised. You get 90 minutes a day to practice, you know, participation, you're going to be in so many games a week, and that stuff. I mean, everybody in the community is watching that, especially the things in your conference trying to catch you, you know, violating one little rule. That's not the problem with kids not having time to do their academics. Travel ball is why kids can't do their academics. Now, you're not going to have a rational. I'm getting ready, hopefully, to insult somebody on the screen. I don't know who. If you think that if you've been insulted, that was my intent. You're not going to have a rational conversation with travel ball parents because they're not rational. Let me say that again. You are not going to have a rational conversation with them about maybe your child needs to, spend a little less time on that and more time on they're not going to hear that. People who opt into that are not rational to begin with because it makes 0 sense, time or financial. Real Sports, Brian Gumbel ran a special on that. It's crazy how much money parents and time spend on that. Absolutely crazy. They could pay for a kid's college education many times over on what they spend on travel ball from the time they're 6 years old. Now, my best friend next door, they did that with their two. Now, one of them did get a college scholarship at Virginia. Great. The boy he was through at the end of high school. But they flew all over the world. Her home games, when she was on the U.S. junior soccer team, were in Phoenix, Arizona. They fly from Charlotte to Phoenix every week for her home games. I can't make this up. There's no telling how much money, and that's a normal thing. So those people have so much money invested. And if you think, again, I'm trying to insult somebody, if you think band parents are crazy, travel ball parents are just as crazy or crazy. It becomes a cult. It's time sensitive. It's become a real problem, especially in our secondary schools, with kids having time to complete assignments and get sleep and rest and all that. They've been traveling all weekend, coming in late on Monday or not showing up till Tuesday. It's become a real thing again. It slowed down during the pandemic, but the pandemic had its own problems, but it's revved back. It's worse now than it's ever been because people couldn't do that for a couple of years and they're like junkies. And so now they're back on the drug again, and Lord have mercy. It's just crazy. It's just crazy what they're going through. You're not going to have a rational conversation with them. They're not going to hear what you have to say. Maybe you'll be better at it than I would be, because I'd just be ugly about it. But you hopefully you've developed a better skill set than I would have. I have no sense of humor over stuff like that. We have school to have school. Now, last thing, and then Dr. Sain's going to be the voice of reason because you know me, I'm just crazy as I can be. I'd fire this teacher. I would move for her dismissal immediately. She tried to cause me to lose my house. As Derek said, I'm the one going to be in court in the Old Bailey. If you don't know that reference, Rumpole at the Bailey, John Mortimer's book. If you don't know that one, you should read the book. But anyway, I'm going to be the one standing in the dock at the Old Bailey, not her. She's tried to take my house. I don't have, and she's done the most harmful thing that you could do to a child other than sexually or physically abuse that child. And it is to take a whole year of their life away, their opportunity for an education. What more would she have to do to lose your trust? Now, last night, Dr. Griffin Jordan, who's with last night's group, she said she'd put her on an action plan and monitor her. She's a lot nicer lady than I am. I freely admit that. I am old school. Adults game demands an adult's price. You went after me, I don't take that easily or lightly. Now, Dr. Sain, he's probably got a more modern and rational interpretation of what you do with this teacher. But yes, you're going to have to go to HR, folks. She broke federal and state law and local policy. You're going to have to go. You're going to have to go to HR and report this is what happened, and an investigation is going to have to occur. My recommendation would be termination. Dr. Sain?
So if you would have asked me this yesterday, I probably would have said an action plan, but I have a quick story. Remember, I told you that after not being a principal for 5 years, I'm being sued along with our school board regarding an incident in a behavior classroom. And I did not fire the teacher because she was not supervising the students accurately. And that's going to come back and bite me in the rear and the district in the rear, because their recommendation wasn't to terminate as well. It was to put on an action plan. and to suspend with pay for a remainder of time, and then and a whole lot of work that then I had to do the following year, where now it's continuing to cause me work. So I think that what Dr. Lamb is saying is so true, that as leaders, sometimes we don't think about ourselves and the impact that it has on us, and we're not selfish, and we should be.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, with all we have to do, we have to look out for ourselves as well, and ultimately our school. A school can lose a teacher. It's hard to lose a principal.
That is correct.
So yeah, I asked me that yesterday, I would have been a 100% advocate of an action plan. Asked me that today, and I say get rid of them.
Yeah. Tort liability is all about protecting yourself, folks. You have to do that. You can't lead a school if you're not there, or if you're in financial peril, or you're in court, these kinds of things. You know, this one took a shot. Now, here's what happens if you don't report that person's bad behavior. Here's what happens if you don't report that person's bad behavior to your HR and initiate an investigation. So yesterday, not far from where I am tonight, I'm in Western North Carolina tonight. I'm not down in the Piedmont at that home. I'm at the other home tonight, up in the mountains, not far from here. A few weeks back, a football coach was suspended without pay, and the principal was suspended with pay. And he has since been terminated, and she now has resigned because she did not investigate and initiate an investigation and report to HR reports that came to her that he was harming both students and faculty. And because he was the football coach and winning ball games, she did not act. She had a duty to act and did not. So here it is. I will share it with you. That show you that this is not from 100 years ago. This is yesterday. And I have a new one every semester because I don't have to wait long. Weeks after being suspended, Tuscola High School principal announces resignation. She was suspended with pay in 22 because they did an investigation and found that she had a duty to act over this football coach who was being a complete horse's ass to both students and faculty. And now she's gone. They did allow her to resign, but that's not going to, by the way, that is not going to end her financial or legal troubles. That will not excuse her from the lawsuits that are coming, that have already been filed. The district is now trying to mitigate their liability, but it's the horse is out of the barn. That one was yesterday, folks. That wasn't 100 years ago or in some land far, far away. I can throw a rock and hit that school on a windy day. So I'm telling you, this is real. For whatever reason, she decided not to act, and they have documented multiple complaints that she did not move on to HR of a teacher's misbehavior. It will not go well for you. And it will come back in the end, as Dr. Sane just said. And I hate that for him, but it will come back. It will come back. Now, full disclosure, I worked in 4 districts across North Carolina. I worked in rural places where it wasn't as big a deal in a time when we didn't have media, but I also worked in the biggest market in the Southeast, the biggest school district in North Carolina, where you couldn't cuss a cat without media. The 4 major networks plus a local TV station, major newspapers, you learn you get tough fast, or you don't make it. And so I physically have scars on my body from learning these things. You might be in a kinder, gentler place, but it's no longer kinder and gentler times. Tort liability is about protecting yourself. You got to do it. All right, we're ready for our second group. Who's next? Sharon, let's go. We'll be much faster this time.
Is it team 2?
It'd be you.
All right. So on my team are Kelly, Anderlicia, Lana, and Michael. And we did use the powers and duties of principal as our guide for our discussion where we talked about this case study. Most importantly, it is our responsibility as principals to assign the grades and to be sure that we improve instruction and community and to discipline students. So when we use this as our guiding question from the case study, and we talked about the importance for us to understand and know the law and the board policy concerning plagiarism and concerning the North Carolina board policy on grading. And we quickly pulled our notes from the other day and realized that she had violated board policy by assigning 50% of the total grade for the course instead of you know, the 10% for out of class or 20% for in class. We did talk about how it wasn't super clear in the case study whether that was completely an out of class assignment, but we all agreed that she had definitely violated board policy on that. We also discussed the need to follow due process for Bobby, and we needed to make sure that as a leader in our school that we met with the teacher and invited that union rep, if that was what the teacher decided, to collect all the facts of the case before we made a decision, because at that point it was primarily hearsay from that conversation over coffee in the office. And it was our duty and responsibility to explain that the teacher had violated board policy by, and in the case study, it does say that she may give a failing grade. And so at that point, we did not,
Didn't put two and two together and understand it was only on the assignment.
right.
You can't give a failing grade for the year. Again, that would be a violation of federal zero tolerance policy.
Right. And you know,
You
it
have to
didn't-
know, and that's why I pointed that one out when we went over that handbook. Why I pointed that one out. You got to know what this means.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like a throwaway. That zero tolerance looks like it's not. What that prevents is abuses by, if you do this, I'll just put you out. It stops that piece of it. I mean,
Right.
that's its intention, is to keep things like this exact case from happening.
All right. Thank you. We also discussed, you know, meeting with Bobby before making a final decision about whether he would fail that particular assignment or if he would be allowed to redo the assignment. And we had a general consensus that the assignment was about school community and about school history, and that would be a valuable assignment in his overall character building to, you know, possibly complete the assignment. So we did feel like that was a serious option to consider, but we all felt like before we made a final decision, we would want to meet with Bobby and talk with him and hear his side of the story. And we know often with our high school students that they often will take on that responsibility and just, you know, so anyway, we also talked about grading, giving him an opportunity to redo and a reduction of a grade. So my colleagues are going to go through the next part of due process. So I'll pass that off to Kelly.
So again, we're talking about due process, that there was none in this case, neither substantive or procedural. Basically talking about substantive due process requires that the rules are fair. And with the zero tolerance policy, it being 50% of his grade, that it automatically failed him. That was not fair. So right there, she had nothing to stand on. And so it'd be hard for the principal to uphold Barton's position to fail the assignment according to due process. And then talking about the procedural due process, that we believe that an alternative solution should be warranted, especially with that word may. in the handbook. That was the big takeaway, was that word, they may fail them. So we were talking about, again, do we have them redo the assignment or take points away? And we thought that with it being the type of activity that it was and the community, that redoing the assignment and giving that grade would be most beneficial to Bobby. Anybody have anything to add to that? Lana, you want to talk about the standards of arbitrary and capricious?
Yeah, so with arbitrary and the capricious, we did say that she acted in both, the teacher acted in both arbitrary and capricious manner. So arbitrary is really, it's really autocratic in the way that you're treating the person that you're coming at. You're acting in an autocratic manner. And in this case, it was the idea that it seemed as though she was playing favorites because of the standard of just choosing Bobby to have this reaction with. Is this an unfair standard than the rest of the students in terms of just simply failing him and not working with him, not going ahead and communicating in terms of a redo policy in a capricious manner? Again, with the grading policy, that was unpredictable. If we look at arbitrary as being something that's unpredictable, it changes, it's unaccountable. The grading policy states one thing, but she's doing something that's counting more than half of the grade for the final. He's going to automatically fail. That's not following the policies and procedures of the board. So that in and of itself is capricious. And so we looked at arbitrary and capricious in that way. So she did act in both arbitrary and capricious manners.
All right, we're going to move on to the 4 ethical paradigms. And I believe, Michael, are you up?
Yeah, the first ethical paradigm is justice. In this case, does the law right or the policy relates to a particular case that exists? In this case, because of the hardship of the grading, there was, being that the student will fail one particular assignment will cause him to go to summer school, there was a way for a kid to recuperate or to make adjustments to better their grade in order for them to pass. So in this case, there was no fairness for a student, or there was no equity or justice for a student, being that this grade would give it such a burden for a student. So in this case, justice was not fair at this time.
All right, and I'll talk about care. Well, in this case, there are multiple things to point out, really in the relationship for the principal to teacher, teacher to student, in multiple ways in looking at care. The biggest thing, if you look at 115C288, if I'm looking at the principal's role, one of the duties, other than already looking at the role and their powers to grade and classify pupils, another one is to improve instruction and community spirit. So as part of that, the potential that the principal, and again, I know we've talked about simply just going ahead and firing her for the mistakes that she's made with the grading policies and the choice she's made in the grading policy. But as part of the principal's responsibility, it does also talk about the fact that one of the roles of the principal is to help improve instruction for the teachers, to talk with teachers. So putting her on an action plan would have been an opportunity that could have been given to her under care. But the big thing was the teacher really missed the opportunity for nurture and encouraging the student when you look at nurtured and encouraged student versus achievement. Because in the case of that, achievement isn't being met at all because the student was not nurtured, he was not encouraged. It was simply none of those things were done. There was no meeting of any of those things. It was a missed opportunity to talk with the student about cheating, to talk with the student about using somebody else's work, and then to build some relational capacity with the student and giving them the opportunity to sit down and work with them on a redo situation, and help the student to achieve, versus you have now failed the class in an unfair policy that's not a board policy, and sending the child to summer school, giving that zero tolerance policy that violated the federal law. So CARE really was violated here in multiple ways.
And Alicia, are you ready to talk about critiquing profession?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about critique, and as it relates to this case study, I would say Ms. Barton behaves in a wrong way. For one, she broke the law, not following the code of conduct, and by assigning the assignment worth more than Bobby's final grade. As it relates to social class, even though Bobby's grandfather was on the board, that should not have been a deciding factor of what the punishment should have been for him, being that his grandfather was involved with the school community. When it relates to power, Ms. Barton used too much power, punishing Bobby by doing what she wanted to do and not asking for getting help or getting somebody to help her with I would have done an action plan, pretty much like something to help her with coming up with a better decision than what she had. And then I feel like that Ms. Barton broke the law and took matters into her own hands, giving Bobby a harsher punishment than what he should have received. Moving on to professionalism, Ms. Barton was not professional, and I feel like she should have been fired. If I was an administrator, she should have been fired. She did not follow the code of ethics. She gave Bobby a harsh punishment, and yeah.
Anybody on the team want to add anything else to the paradigms of ethics?
I think the last biggest thing that we talked about too, going back to that relationship, talking about the 4 paradigms, is that through everything, we have to remember what we're in this for, what the teachers are in this for, and that we're teaching students, we're teaching tiny human beings, and they make mistakes. He confessed right away, explained his why. So we always have to bring it back to that relationships matter, and that this could potentially be the cause of a lot of other issues down the road for him. So just with bringing it back into giving that second chance and the understanding, I think that was one of our big takeaways.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd like to add, based on what Zoom Team 1 mentioned, especially moving forward, it really gave me pause to consider, like thinking about moving upstream and getting ahead of situations. And I don't know that in the case study if it mentioned how long she'd been at that school or, her years of service, but I think it's important for us to consider Bobby's support and other students that may be like Bobby who might be feeling overwhelmed with coursework and extra assignments. It sounded like it was a pretty intensive assignment that she had given. And if that was close to the end of the school year, that could have been a burden with all of the other things that were happening during that. And so getting ahead of those types of situations and talking with teachers about that, and the fact that she, was gonna violate board policy, was she doing that maliciously, or was she just unknowingly giving that grade, thinking that that assignment was so important maybe to her that she graded it more? And so I appreciate Zoom Team 1 for kind of thinking about getting counselors involved and time management, because high school students are notoriously terrible about underestimating and overestimating how much time something will take. And so I just wanted to mention that as well. And also to my awesome Zoom team too, who helped work through this together.
I also want to add to what you were saying too, Kim. As educators, I've learned this, we have to build relationships with our students. And I feel like Miss Barton didn't have, maybe she didn't build a good relationship with Bobby because she just automatically wanted to fail him. So just having that connection and that relationship with him, maybe she would have had a better understanding to why he did what he did with that assignment. But she didn't. She just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to give him a failing grade. So having those relationship with your students is a big thing.
Yeah. You know, as I told you last week, and I'll be blunt again, full disclosure, Bobby's a turd. She saw a chance to get Bobby back. I mean, that's all that happened. That's all that's happening here, folks. Let's be honest about what's going on here. You can't make something. I mean, this is not just one small boo-boo. This is a series of willful violations of law here going on. A reasonable person, you know, somebody that's never even, you know, been inside of a school other than when they went, knows that this is just completely, you know, over the top. But, you know, there's some things that I want to point out from, you know, one of the things that was said at the end. I had a teacher, let's call him Dan. He taught U.S. history. He spent the whole year teaching the Civil War because he was a Civil War reenactor. How many questions are on the EOC end of course test in U.S. history on the Civil War? That would be 2. You can't let people put importance on things that aren't really important. And so you got to know that as well. That's one of those things. You got to be in classrooms. You got to know what folks are doing. Kim made a good point. This might have been this teacher's world, but that's, again, that's back on you. I mean, if I let it up to, you know, if I left it up to Dan, we'd have never done anything but teach the Civil War. But you can, you know, that's not in the student's best interest. But I want to share my screen and go back to the ethical paradigms. And now we're going to have a grown person conversation now. About the real world. When we talk about corrupted morals, power, social class, generally it's not the Bobbies of the world that are getting treated this way. It's the kids of color and at the end of the social spectrum. That's who's getting treated this way. That's the truth of the matter. So the notion of, when I keep talking about federal law, zero tolerances are against the law. The reason why they are and why they were enacted goes back to this one right here, where it says Jim Crow. What's a Jim Crow law? It's an unwritten law that you use to punish somebody or limit their access. And so that's why the federal government has said these zero tolerance laws, that policies that school districts and schools put in, are nothing more than Jim Crow in disguise. They're a way to kick out kids that we don't want in school, who may not be the best behaved or may not, you know, be the best dressed or the most socially acceptable. That's the whole notion here. That's what Jim Crow means. It's stuff that we did wink and nod, where we made these gotcha policies so that we could get these kids out that we don't want in school. That's the whole part. That's the purpose of Jim Crow. That's what that means there. And something like if you cheat, you fail for the year. That's a gotcha policy. That's why they're illegal. And we know that zero tolerance. And so let me share this one with you. And this link is in our class shell. And this is a wonderful article. Just put in Z when it comes up, it'll have a box for you to type in what you want to do. Type in zero tolerance policy. This is the Center for Public Justice. But I love what it says over here. Zero tolerance policies are the #1 contributor to the school to prison pipeline. And we know that. That's why they're illegal. It's to protect the powerless. That's why the federal government has outlawed them, is to try to help the powerless, because it's not the Bobbies of the world who get exercised on. It's that poor little kid of color down at the end of the line there that we tend to exercise these arbitrary and capricious and completely illegal policy, Jim Crow policies on. That's who gets the brunt of these things in reality. And we know where that's going to lead. So that's an adult conversation, folks. That's the real world. It's usually not the Bobbies of the world that the teacher takes the run at. It's the poor little kid at the end of the road that's got nobody to stand up for him. That's who we're trying to protect in outlawing zero tolerance. That's adult conversation. That's just the way of the world. That's the truth. You know, that it's a sad thing that I have to say that, but it's just a true thing, and that's why those things have been out. All right, we're ready for our next group.
Hi, everybody. This is Evelyn. I'm in group 3, also with Allison and Kimberly, Allison Shelton and Kimberly Sparks. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So we know we're on case study 1. So I have the substantive due process part. So we know the substantive due process requires that rules and policies be fair in and of themselves. The policies and rules were not fair in and of themselves because the teacher counted one project as more than half of little Bobby's final grade. And is the teacher adhering to a grading policy for the school and the weight of the assignments? And also the teacher did not follow the rules in regards to documenting discipline by showing what action she took before this happened and referrals leading up to taking this to the principal. Okay, procedural due process requires that the policies, rules, and regulations be carried out in a fair manner. Things were not carried out in a fair manner, as group 1 and group 2 both pointed out. There was no documentation of any previous incidents or this incident in the system. The teacher did not complete any referrals for anything of this matter. Zero tolerance policies are against the law because there was no steps in place to if this happens the first time, this happens, second time, then this consequence happens. It was just zero tolerance in the teacher's frame of mind. Bobby was not interviewed by the principal, nor asked to give a statement to anyone other than the teacher. There was no witness present to hear Bobby admit to the teacher that he plagiarized the assignment, and the parents were also not notified about the incident. And I think Kimberly Allison is going down.
The 4 ethical paradigms, I'll read the justice. The principal will be fair and equitable and will not make special treatments because of who Bobby Henson's uncle is. He'll be fair to the other team members and his consideration of their futures in regards to Bobby's punishment. So we were talking about, they were talking about the scholarships. And even though you're focusing on Bobby, you have to think about these other kids too. And if they talked about scholarships, well, if you don't want to ruin a kid's future or several kids' futures. So if this means kids maybe not getting an opportunity to go to college, is it worth all that? If scholarships are the only way that these children are going to get a chance to possibly go to college, it's not worth that. So we talked about that. And then the punishment of giving the student a failing grade would be considered capricious. This would cause the student to not only fail the project, but fail for the course. Since there was only one student involved, there is no other student to compare the consequences to or to punish, which is arbitrary. Kimberly, you want to do that one?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Okay, the 4 ethical paradigms of ethics dealing with care. We discussed the severity of the incident. It's imperative that the principal handles the incident with care. Of course, as everyone has stated, if he does not, we know that legal backlash is going to come. And also, as Allison just mentioned, the final decision has the potential to damage Bobby's future, both educationally and dealing with athletics. So, you know, him having to go to summer school or even potentially having to repeat that grade could damage him. And we don't know what that could cause for his future, as well as athletics, him being a great baseball player. You know, he could just go down the wrong path. It could just completely destroy his life because of this one little mistake that he made. The principal must also be concerned about what is best for the students. Same thing, like she said, talking about the scholarships and it affecting the students in the community. The principal must make the final decision in regards to the discipline. We found it important to note, like in our text, this week's reading, it talked about how discipline should lead to cease the misbehavior and not actually inflict pain on someone. So we feel like, you know, causing Bobby to fail the course would inflict pain on him. And then also, in means of providing support, maybe Bobby needs a lesson, as others have stated, on how to manage his time or plagiarism, like the do's and don'ts, you know, what you should not do, even though, you know, he copied his brother's paper, but maybe he needs some type of lesson, some type of, I can't think
What
of
plagiarism is.
right. Yeah, what it is, because whether you believe it or not, I teach English and a lot of these students don't know what plagiarism is. So maybe he needs a lesson on that. Sorry, my button. It's not one. Okay.
And then the next one is critique. The principal must follow procedural due process because Bobby is a minor. We're assuming he's a minor just because he's in high school. If he does not, he will be violating Bobby's human rights. Principal has to be careful not to use his power to make the wrong decision just because he is getting pushed from Bobby's uncle.
For ethical paradigms of ethics dealing with profession, again, the principal should do what's in the best interest of the students. And like many have already said, we're in this profession because hopefully we love students and, you know, we don't want to, you know, hate them and cause any damage to them. So you always have to think about the best interest of the students. The principal is accountable for the student's academic and social success. If the student fails, the principal, you know, is accountable to the student and his parents. And again, the opportunity for scholarships in college. We found this important. We think the principal should reflect on his practice. Maybe that student handbook needs to be updated in regards to the consequences of cheating.
Whoa, wait a minute now. Whoa.
Sorry.
Whoa. Schools can't do that. Schools
Okay.
can't update code of conduct. Who does code of conduct?
The district?
It's the board.
The board.
The board.
Board of Education does code of conduct. You know, that can't do that.
So the school handbook,
Yeah,
the Board of Education does the school handbook?
Does the code of conduct.
Code of conduct.
They do the code of conduct.
Okay.
And they have to approve the school handbook as well, by the way.
Okay, because it said student handbook.
You can't just be making decisions. I like this and don't like that. It's not a menu. You don't get to pick.
Okay.
So you
stay in your lane. You got to know what your authority is.
Okay.
So you're saying the code of conduct and the handbook, two different things?
The code of conduct is in the student handbook. The faculty handbook is usually contains the things that has to do with grading and grading policy. But regardless of which one we're talking about, they are both derived and approved by your Board of Education. Schools can change neither of those. You can't just decide, but we're gonna go this way, or we're gonna go that way, or we're gonna do this, or we're gonna ignore that. The faculty handbook is approved by the Board of Education. The code of conduct is derived or created by and approved by the Board of Education. Now, we all know that staff does that. But let's be honest. Somebody in the
Right.
central office writes that code of conduct and then negotiates with the board members what they want for them to
Right.
approve it. It's the same way with faculty handbooks. Principals write those, but then they have to have them approved. You can't make any changes to either of those that have not been approved by your board. So it's not as simple as, we're going to review this and we may make some changes to our policy. No, you're not.
Okay.
Let's be clear on that. Again, we have to remember law. Federal law trumps state law trumps local board policy trumps whatever happens at the school. We can't make any of those decisions on our own. All that stuff, if we wanted a change in our handbook, we would have to recommend that back up the line and they'd get back to us. But we cannot just in-house decide that we're going to change something or clarify something or add something or take something out. We're not allowed to do that. No. We got to remember the governance piece of how schools work.
So I have a quick question for you. So when we were working, like we looked up one particular district's like the student code of conduct.
Yes.
Then we saw like particular schools in that district, you know, they're the I guess you say student code of conduct that they had on their websites and they weren't balancing up, if that makes sense.
Well, there's two things at play there. Different levels. Different levels have different interpretations. And what I just said, the second piece is what I just said. If you would like a variation, you would have to propose that and the school board would have to approve it. And the reason why that happens is what we call public separates or special schools have certain special circumstances. Like they have a different bell schedule, their populations, there's certain things like that. You can propose those things, but you can't just enact those because you want to. You have to understand that. Now, I don't ever see very much variation in code of conduct other than level, other than public separates. Public
There was
separate would be like an EC school or an alternative school or something like that, or a virtual school. They may have modifications made, but they weren't made at the school level and said, this is what we're going to go with. That's not how that happened.
Yes, sir. Evelyn?
You want to read this one, Evelyn?
Yes, I got you. What should the principal's course of action be? Is the goal to apply a punishment to lead the student to cease the behavior and not commit a similar violation in the future? Or is the goal to actually inflict some sort of pain to the student per our book? The student will be given 1 day of ISS and given the opportunity to redo the assignment. Since this is Bobby's first offense, he would receive a level 1 consequence. If this were to occur again, he would receive a level 2 consequence alternative classroom assignment. Charlotte,
all right, so let me ask you this question, Evelyn. Great point there. I've got this one pulled up, so I won't even have to cue it up. Under a level 1 offense in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, what's the maximum punishment Bobby could receive? The maximum.
The 1 day of ISS.
1 day of ISS. He could have gotten as little as just a conference or a warning, couldn't he? The most he could have gotten was 1 day of ISS. So let's make sure that we understand this isn't actually a discipline incident, and we have to go back to the code of conduct. And we can't. We got to make sure that we're consistent in that. And one of the things that everyone just said that is kind of overarching of this entire case is the whole point of discipline is not retribution or punishment. It's restorative justice. Try to change the behavior. So let's remember those factor into that arbitrary and capricious as well. Excellent. All right, move on.
I think that was it.
All righty, but again, to Kim's point, you need to review your policies with your faculty, but you're not reviewing them to see if they agree or not. We're not asking them, do you agree with this and should we enforce this or not? You don't have that option. You don't get to pick and choose. The reason why they hire school administrators is to make sure that policy is carried out, period. That's your job, that law and policy is carried out. You don't get to pick and choose. Now, one of the questions that you're going to be asked, and we're going to cover this, and if you were in last semester's, I don't think I invited y'all last semester, but you will definitely be in this semester's interviewing session on how to interview for jobs. One of the things that I will tell you in one of the levels of interviews, generally it's going to be in the very first level interview. There's 4 different levels of interviews that you're going to have to go through to become a school administrator. You might as well understand that now. If you have a hard time interviewing, it's not going to be a fun process, but you're going to get through it. We promise we'll get you through it. There's 4 levels of interviews that you have to get through. The first level is the general interview, or what we call the cattle call interview, where they try to separate the wheat from the chaff, the people that don't need to be in the business. The second level is the group interview, where you have what I call civilians. You might have parents, you'll have teachers, you might have community members, to see if you can collaborate and communicate with people other than inside of the building, professional. Then you'll have the principal interview, where you get to use all your jargon and anonyms and all that stuff, where you can talk about CPI and CRT and PBIS, all the, you can just go crazy with your jargon. And then the 4th level will be your superintendent or area superintendent interview. But in that first level interview, especially if it's part of the old Gallup or Strength Finder interview series. By the way, I'm Gallup certified. It took a whole year working for the Gallup organization to get certified to do that. But even if you don't go through the formal Gallup interview, one of the landmine questions that you'll be asked in that initial interview is there's a rule or a policy in your district that you don't really agree with, that you think harms students, would you enforce that policy at your school? That's what they're going to ask you. Guaranteed that's going to be one of the first questions that you get asked. What if you say, well, if I think it harms students and I wouldn't enforce it, will you get a second interview? Will you progress to interview number 2? That would be no. Your primary responsibility as a school administrator is to carry out laws and policy, period. It's just that simple. And you don't get the option to decide what you like or don't like, or support or won't support, or if it just doesn't fit our school, we'll change it, or our faculty's having a hard time with that one. That's unfortunately, that's not the way it works. And we have to know that governance piece, that these things have been handed down. So just like when we go to that disciplinary data manual that I've shown you, before it tells you what you got to do, it shows you all the laws and policies behind it that says that you have to do that. And then it says, this is what you must do. And you see that all the way through that manual. Okay, here's the law. Here's state board policy. Here's the federal law. All right, now this is what you as administrator must do. And you got to know that if you don't want to do those things, then it's not going to go well for you. So it's a good idea to make sure you review all laws and policies and rules and code of conduct, consequences, and all those things. But don't think that if there's something in there that we don't really agree with, or that we're having trouble with, that we can just change that. You can't. The board develops, whoever's running alternative ed usually does it, or whoever's in charge of secondary discipline usually does it. Their office puts together the code of conduct every year with the level system, and then takes it to the board and negotiates it back and forth, and the board has to approve it. The board don't actually do the work. They just decide if they want to vote for it or not. Now, in terms of faculty handbooks, you have a template that your district will give you for that faculty handbook, and you put all the stuff in it that they already want, all the non-negotiables. You turn it back in and it gets approved before you ever give it to the faculty. You can't just decide that you want to put stuff in it like, well, we don't, our teachers are having trouble getting here by 8:15, so we're going to move our bell schedule to 8:30. No, you don't get to do stuff like that. Everything that's in your faculty handbook has been approved by your district as well. So you need to make sure that you understand your primary function. You got to be champion for kids. Yes, that's kind of overarching instead of champion for teachers. I know that sounds ugly, but you can't be a champion for teachers. You got to be a champion for kids, and you must make sure that your job is to follow all and enforce all laws and policies. Without that, we would descend into chaos. My last story before we get to our last group tonight is Dr. Anna Maraglia that works with us. She's administrator in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Dr. Maraglia is a star, always has been a star. She applied for a principal fellow at UNC Charlotte. She went in, did her interview, and did not make it. This was 20 or more years ago. She was crushed. Couldn't figure out why until we sat down and talked to her about, well, what did they ask you and what did you say? She said, well, I told them my dream had always been a school administrator so I could be a champion for teachers. And I was like, they're not going to accept you into their program. 2 years later, she reapplied. And this time she knew what to say and she got in, and her career has gone from there. But she made that mistake of telling the committee for North Carolina Principal Fellow that her goal was to be a champion for teachers. That's exactly the people that we can't have in the business, unfortunately. Got to be a champion for kids. All right, last group. We're right on time.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right, guys, we're gonna make this short and sweet. I've been taking a lot of notes from Dr. Lamb. And we're Zoom team 4. I'm Sandra. And then we're gonna have Jackie and Sarah and Robin. And we have approached our presentation from the standpoint of just doing a general outline of the 4 major parts, okay? So we're gonna start out just with the question, because I think we intentionally did not make any assumptions, but approached the presentation from looking at all of the facts within the case study. So first up, the question is, let me see, here we go. Let's go back one, two, go back. Hold on, let me go back. I don't want all that there yet. Okay. So the story goes that Bobby is a star athlete, and of course he made a bad decision to plagiarize, a move that had the potential to have a devastating outcome for both his sports and academic career. He felt he had no time to do the assignment because the school's baseball team kept him busy. And as we all know the story, he went back 2 years, borrowed a paper from his brother, and he turned it in and said it was his. Subsequently, the teacher in the scenario made a call because she just had something she wanted to prove against Bobby. And I'm in agreement with everybody that she probably should have gotten dismissed, but she did not. Here we go. And I'm clicking my mouse and it is doing what it wants to do here. So for his admission to plagiarism, he should receive a documented consequence, but allow him the opportunity to resubmit the assignment for reduced credit. And we all kind of came to that conclusion and agreed that that would be the best option. So the question being, should Bobby fail and attend summer school? We thought maybe not, just give him a second chance. Okay. And next up is Robin.
Okay, to answer the question, what should be the principal's course of action? We concluded that the decision, because the school handbook rule used the term may, which, gave us a little, we thought about it a little more when it said may, that shouldn't be him failing the actual class. Getting a failing grade for the actual class, just maybe for the assignment. So a failing grade would, that he would not get that failing grade. He would just get a failing grade for the assignment. So we decided that the action could be that he can possibly get ISS and redo the paper again at a reduced credit. So we thought that Bobby should get a second chance to make sure that he understands what plagiarism is and he can be able to do it, possibly if he can be in a room where somebody's watching, so he doesn't have to like plagiarize or anything, and he can just kind of understand that plagiarism isn't accepted.
Due process, we're going to turn to Jackie.
So with the due process, considering whether it's substantive or procedural, so is it fair and reasonable in content, and does it safeguard what must be satisfied to protect life, liberty, and property? The principal's decision to allow Bobby to resubmit the assignment is fair and reasonable in application of the law, as it does not provide multiple punishments for one academic behavior. This decision safeguards Bobby's right to pass the course based on his comprehensive performance, not one action. So to cause him to fail the course because of this one action would be like charging him twice for the same crime, basically. And we did not feel that that was in alignment with the law.
Okay,
And-
then the arbitrary and capricious, the term arbitrary and capricious grading means that the assignment of a course grade is based on something other than it's in the class or by unreasonable application of standards different from other students. And in this case, the course grade is being determined by one assignment or the lack of assignment in Bobby's case because he didn't actually do it himself. And one assignment should not be than half of the total grade, which everyone's mentioned tonight. And although we don't know the other cases of how plagiarism was dealt with, we can assume that the other students did not fail the class as a consequence, which would make that arbitrary and capricious because they wasn't the same for everybody.
Okay. And then we took a look at the 4 paradigms of ethics. Care is going to be.
There is having compassion and empathy. And it consists of also thinking about the student's intellectual, emotional, psychological, and physical health. And we thought that the principal didn't just think about the rules, he put this first by allowing the student to redo the actual the paper over. And Bobby did admit to cheating and saying that it was his brother's paper that he did before. And asking the question, would failing the class affect him emotionally, physically, psychologically, or intellectually? Like, what effect would it really have on him? Like attending summer school and while he would have to miss out on the baseball tournament in that summer? And the principal, teacher, and Bobby can work together, engage in a relationship of mutual responsibility. The teacher herself, she could possibly build a relationship with Bobby to see if there's anything that she was missing that she can, just kind of help him in certain areas. And also after doing that, the principal can join in so they can have like a tag team within each other so they can kind of work together to make sure Bobby is successful.
Thank you, Robin. Jackie?
So in terms of critique, considering if it's a situation of corrupted morals, if power, critical theory, social class, if all of those things are considered, what we thought about was, is it possible that the teacher is acting in a manner to teach Bobby a lesson because she doesn't like the power that his family wields? Also, in contrast, some of the other groups talked about how his family wields power and that shouldn't be considered. I think in this case, both of those situations are taking place in terms of power, both the teacher and the consideration of the family. Also, definitely, as has been said before, considering would she carry the same punishment out for other students? And does the punishment of failing the entire course fit the crime of plagiarizing one assignment? And in this instance, we definitely do not feel that she would punish another student in this way, and that she would not, and that the punishment does not fit the crime. So it's definitely a situation of corrupted power at the very least.
Okay. And mine was justice, and I pointed out that No one is above the law. Yes, a mistake was made, poor judgment on the part of the athlete. However, all care should be taken to ensure that fair and equitable treatment is granted the defendant, pointing out the 14th Amendment, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, abbreviated, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And it would, in my opinion, would be considered arbitrary and capricious under the law to withhold available options that could prevent a move toward greater legal action for the school in this case. Sarah?
Great. So in the professional, acting in a professional manner, ultimately, the principal is responsible for the student's grade and can override the teacher if seen fit. The principal here needs to act ethically, not giving in to the pressure of the community, but in the best interest of the student. The principal needs to think about if the consequences match the action of the student. Did cheating on this project match failing him for the whole semester? And the student, we agree that the student needs consequences, but one that fits the situation for the actions. And does plagiarism match failing the course? Again, like that's the big question.
Thank you. And unless anyone has anything else they would like to add before we let you know that these are our references, and it has been our pleasure to make this presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent job across the board tonight. I am so pleased with all of you. Your thought processes are good. Great job. You shouldn't be nervous. You'll do better each time as we go. You'll grow and into this. Nobody got bit or hit, or nobody got punched or poked tonight. It's all part of the learning process. But we're we're playing for high stakes here, folks. We're talking about your careers, not losing your house. This is serious stuff. You've got to learn these things. As that principal who I flashed on the screen earlier this evening, she didn't follow the policy. What's the policy when somebody reports to you that they've been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted? She didn't do it. It's just that simple. She made a decision not to follow through with the policy. And now the district is on the hook. Just because they fired the coach and she's resigned, they let her resign, that doesn't mean they're off the hook. And they know that. They had a person who didn't follow the policy. That's what that leads to, and that's it. So the 5 areas, this kind of expands on our case study tonight. And again, wonderful job. And Dr. Sane will give the benediction in just a minute. But here are the 5 areas that that they're really going to hit you on in that first level interview to make sure that you're the right kind of person to move into school administration. First thing, as I said, they're going to ask you about, will you follow policy even if you don't agree with it, or even if it's painful or conflict, like in the case with the coach, will you follow policy? And now one of the things that we think is minor, but is principals tend to fall in the trap of not following the policy. In North and South Carolina, they're both right to work states. There is no such thing as comp time. Now, don't raise your hand, don't nod your head up and down. But I know that a lot of you know that there are some principals that run a little comp time system at their school. That's completely illegal. It's against the policy. It's against state law. That's the kind of things that we're talking about. That's the kind of stuff that'll come back and bite you. Will you follow the policies? Will you follow the laws? So that's the big one, and reporting is the big one, and that's why they have a whole manual that says if this happens, you will do this. You will report this. You will call the law. You will tell this immediately. And if you don't, it's going to come back to bite you. The second thing that you're going to be asked, and again, it goes to that being champion for kids. If it paid exactly the same, salary wise, would you prefer to work with adults or students? That'll be one of the questions that they'll ask. If you say adults, then they'll move you on in the process. If you say students, you're out. Well, what do you mean? I prefer to work with students. You got to understand, you're going to be working with adults as a school administrator for the benefit of kids. But you got to understand that your job is going to be to affect the big people in your building, the big kids, make them act like responsible professionals. That's what they hired you for. Third thing is on time. Are you an on time person? And the answer to that is yes. I'm actually early. Because if you're not on time, if you're not time driven, because schools are, how are you going to be there? How are you going to set an example and require teachers to be where they need to be supervision wise if you're not there? If you're late, if you're never where you're supposed to be, then that will become habitual in your building. And so they'll ask you that one. They'll ask you if you're a competitive person. If you say no, this is not the business for you. Remember, scores count. That's why we have a report card. You better be competitive, not only that you want your school to achieve, but also enrollment. We're all competing for enrollment. You got to be the kind of school that people want to come to, because there's a lot of choice out there today. And the last one is will you protect kids through privacy? Will you let media get to them? Protect their information, be a champion for them. They'll ask you, those are the 5 areas that they'll try to discern when they're doing that initial interview. If you're the kind of person that we can go on and talk more about in depth. Again, the 5 are, will you follow policy? Do you want to work with adults? Are you on time? Are you competitive? Because school's a competitive business now, both achievement and enrollment wise. And will you protect kids through FERPA laws as federal government says you will? So to summarize this case, federal law was broken in terms of 14th Amendment, no due process, zero tolerance policy. State law was broken on the grading scale. Local board policy was broken in terms of code of conduct in terms of more punishment was meted out than was allowed. The least of your responsibilities in this case, again, is to report this to your human resources that this person attempted or did break all these laws and make a recommendation as to what would happen. Again, I would recommend this termination dismissal. I think this is the most heinous thing you can do outside of physically or sexually abusing a child. To deny them a whole year, you're pretty much putting them in prison, or you're pretty much causing them to be a high school dropout. This is not going to go well. If this kid's parents have the wherewithal, they might can get over it, but it's not going to be easy. The majority of kids that you would do this to, that would be the end of their, it would be the end of their life, most likely. So this is a big deal. You got to understand your responsibility, laws, policies, you got to understand the governance model, that you can't just decide to, enforce some, not others. This was not a principal problem. Now, full disclosure, we're going to have some principal problems later in our case studies. We've got one where the principal was a complete wrong number. We got another one that pretty much a wrong number. But now this case is not a principal problem. This is, you had a teacher who went rogue. Whether it was her first year or 10th year, doesn't matter. I mean, this teacher went rogue. What are you going to do in response? Dr. Sane, close us out tonight. Thank you again as our principal expert being here with us tonight.
You're welcome. And yeah, like you said, I'll reiterate, great job. It is clearly evident that you all are looking at the powers and duties of a principal, 115C, 288. Yep. Remember, I harped on that, and Dr. Lamb's harped on it. It is so evident. Some of you even called it out specifically. And I will finish with just saying it is so important to stay ahead of that and to make your staff aware of what they're supposed to do. So to make your staff aware of grading policies the first week of school and then constantly readdressing that can hopefully reduce the amount of times that this is going to happen. Now, you could talk about grading until you're blue in the face, and there's always going to be the teacher who goes rogue. There's always going to be the teacher who says, I'm going to handle discipline and do my thing in my classroom because I don't want administration to do it. And I will tell you that sometimes those are our best teachers, but we still have to monitor them. We still have to check in with them and make sure that they are they're following policy as we as leaders are supposed to ensure that we're complying with. So again, good job. If you haven't read that or haven't been diving into 115C, please start doing that because it's a lot. But if you follow that, you're going to be the best administrator ever.
That's exactly right. Please remember to follow through with your reflection of this case. You can tell me anything, what you learned, you know, what you didn't learn, what you should have learned, how well your group worked together, how well they didn't work together. You know, what was your takeaway from this case? You know, most of the time students tell me that, you know, it really brought this home or that home, or my group worked really well together. Or I had one today from the class last night who said, I finally figured out what you were talking about. It's a whole nother level of skill that you have to collaborate to produce a product than just to get on Zoom and talk to one another. And so I did have one group that figured that out. I was thankful to hear that. Yes, this is a whole nother level of skill that you're developing by collaborating virtually to produce a product. That's not as easy as getting together and talking. It is a skill set in itself. And it never gets easier, by the way. It's always difficult. You think, well, we'll just get together and just pop right through this. It never works that way, folks. Never. And so it is truly a skill set of negotiation and collaboration and those kinds of things. And so y'all have done exceedingly well. I am so pleased, and I'm glad you're digging into the law. 115C, you know, there's 545 of those, but most specifically 288. Yeah, you got to know that one backward and forward, because that's how that's what you're going to be educated on. Sandra, you've got a question as we close out tonight?
Yes, I just have a quick question. I'm so confused about the text. Like, the book that I got is only by the Hachia man.
Yeah,
There's
that's
no
a later
other
edition.
authors.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
a
like
later.
the 4th edition. This is the one
Right.
Scott.
Yeah, that's they had some 3rd editions left over that they sent out, and the rest they sent out for. So, but it,
okay.
you know, it's the same stuff. It's the same guy.
Because it didn't have a chapter 15.
Right. But that information is in there. It will be in there.
Okay,
And you'll pardon me for not being able to make the reference. They didn't have enough. I told them to send them all to y'all, and so they didn't even have a desk copy for me. So I don't have a 4th edition right now, and I can't get one online.
Okay.
The chapter titles are similar. If you'll kind of look at that, you should be able to figure that out. I figured y'all would be able to adjust, but unfortunately they started filling orders and ran out of 3rd and went ahead and did 4th, and they started filling them with 4th. And then they asked me after they'd already done it, was that okay? I said, what am I going to say now? No, people aren't going to send them back. But that's what happened. Now, you know, Gardner Webb no longer does their books. They subcontract to Barnes and Noble. And therein lies our problem with that Bulldog bundle and editions and all that stuff. They are a business. They're going to do what's best for them. Now, they should have. Now, if it'd been our bookstore, they wouldn't have sent those 3rd editions out. They'd told me that we don't have enough when I ordered them back in the fall when I ordered them for this semester. They'd have said, we don't have enough. Do you want to switch over? And sent me a desk copy to change our syllabus and our outline. But now Barnes and Noble will not do that. They needed to get rid of. They paid for those books they wanted to get rid of. And I hope that whoever from Barnes and Noble is listening to my commentary tonight, because that fella, he's about the size of a 7th grader. I ain't worried about him. I'll meet him out in the hall. That's the Barnes and Noble rep. So I can talk really bold about him. He's kind of small. But yes, I apologize, but yes, we have switched over to Barnes and Noble, and they're in the business to sell, not to make sure that we have our needs.
Okay, thank you.
I hate that too.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
Last week I met with the head of elementary schools, and she suggested that I go and visit middle schools and high schools.
That's great.
Can I count that as my internship?
Absolutely. That's wonderful. We like that. That's a good thing. Yay.
One more question. So I'm a part of my school-based work plan. And so we're going to work like 8 hours this week and 8 hours next week. Can I count all that time, or do I just need to do like a few hours of it?
Well, I would, generally on things like that, what I say is that you can count them all, but make sure you got more than 80 at the end of the semester. Don't make all 16 of them be 1/5 of what you did this semester. That never looks good, because people look at that stuff. Prospective employers, we have to turn it into the state for your hours. They kind of frown on. The general rule of thumb is you can't count more than anything what would be considered one work day, 7.5 hours. Just like if somebody goes on to a field trip to Washington and they're gone all week, we can't count 120 hours. We can only count 7.5 hours is what we're supposed to count. And I usually round that up to 8.
Okay, because
They want to see a diversity of activities.
Okay, I'm going to the principals roundtables that they have once a month with our principal.
Yeah.
So I count that it's 2 hours.
Absolutely. You put that at the top of the list, because that boy, everybody likes to see that. That's a good one. But let's be honest, folks. These internship activities, some of them are better than others, and some of them are more impressive than others. As I've told you, once you've done bus duty a time or two and you understand 2 things: don't get run over and wear a coat long enough to cover you behind in the wintertime, you got that down. I don't want to see 40 hours of bus duty on your log, because that looks bad for you. That really looks bad for you. You want to see things like going to principal's meeting. That's the best one. That's number one. If you ask me what's the most impressive thing that you could do as an intern, getting to go to the principal's meeting with your principal, even if it's just one time a semester, that's the best thing ever. That's the best thing ever if you get to do that. Get to go to principal's roundtable, principal's meeting. Oh yeah. Put on put on your good wig and go to the principal's meeting. Oh boy, that's the one. That's the one. That's the most impressive one. Kristen, you got a question?
Yeah. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to a leadership conference with my principal and AP. It will be a Sunday, like all day Sunday, all day Monday. Like, I know I'm not going to count like overnight kind of things, but
yeah,
while we're in the conference, is that time
8 hours?
okay?
Yeah, 8 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Count that one as 8 hours. Yeah, that would be good. Count that one as 8 hours. Yeah. Okay, Michelle, you got a question?
Okay, so I have done some principal meetings as well with my principal. They have a monthly meeting, so I can certainly count that. But
yeah,
I've already done principal kind of for the day. Like, my principal is out of the building, and I have already have 2 days just for this semester. How many times can I count that entire day that she's out for the 8?
2 times. Again, you can put them on there as many as you do, but make sure that when you do your calculation at the end for your 80 hours, that you're not counting 10 of those as your 80 hours. You can count 2 toward, put them all on there. It looks good if you've got 120 hours or 140.
Okay. So a question, if, while I am administrator on duty, let's say, one of those competencies comes up, even though I'm not counting those hours.
Competencies don't have to match your hours. You can get them anywhere.
Okay.
Those artifacts can come from anywhere. And again, get the best ones that have the best visual appeal. If you can get somebody, hand somebody your phone and have them take a picture of you standing on the bus lot with your radio, stuff like that. And that we want, the whole point of that competency folio, those artifacts, is for that visual appeal, for people to be able to project you in the role. They can see that you can be that. I mean, that's the thing you got to convince people of, is that you can be that you won't be like Barney. I've told you the story. You can't be like Barney when you just like Michelle was talking about, let her be principal for a day, or she's in charge when the principal leaves her building. You know what happened in the first season of Andy Griffiths? When Andy left and went to Raleigh, he put Barney in charge. First thing Barney did was deputized Otis to town drunk and gave Gomer a gun. I mean, you've got to be able to project that you will be a reasonable person who won't set the place on fire or give Gomer a gun while they're gone. And those visual images of you in that role, that's what sways people in the hiring process more than anything else. They look at what you did in the content of those hours, and they've got those visual images that project you, that show you in that role. That's what gets you jobs. That's why we do what we do.
One more
that's why
thing.
we do that.
Sorry, one more thing. I've already asked my coworkers to send emails when I've done something like administrator role. They're not great about doing that all the time, but do I need to still collect those as evidence?
I love those screenshots. I mean, screen grab those emails, those
Okay.
PNGs, grab them and upload them. Again,
Okay.
there's no rule that says you only have to have 3 artifacts under each competency. You have to have a minimum of 3 by state plan, and I've defined those for you. But I've got some folks that have 15 under each competency. I'm serious. I have some folks that have 15.
Okay, thank you.
And the more visual images you have, the better you are. Yes, you need some documents, I understand, but we love those PNGs. We love those pictures, and I look at them too, by the way. And so, one more thing as we're exiting out here, Michelle brought up a good point. When she's in the role, please make sure that you dress the role when you're in the role, because we're going to get that picture of you. Again, it helps for people who are prospective employers to project you in that role. Again, put on your good wig. All right. Again, I am so proud of you. You've done such a great job. I'm pleased with the class all the way through everything. There's no but coming. Y'all are doing really well. You should congratulate yourselves. Make sure you do your reflection, and I will see you next week. So everybody have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.